I was 21 when my older sister Olivia told me she was pregnant. She was 27 at the time, living with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, and I could already tell from the look on her face that this wasn't a happy announcement. She cried the whole time she told me, said she didn't want to be a mom, that she felt trapped, and that she didn't know what to do. I remember sitting on the worn-out couch in our mom's old living room as she kept saying over and over that she wasn't ready, that her life was just starting, that she didn't want to give up everything she'd worked for. Olivia had always been the wild one in our family, the free spirit. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the old soul, the planner. At the time, I had just started a job as a preschool teaching assistant and was living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. I didn't have much, but I was stable, and maybe that's why she came to me. At first, it was just a hypothetical. Olivia started floating these little questions. What would you do if you had a baby but didn't want to raise it? Would you ever adopt from someone you knew? What if I gave you the baby? I thought she was venting. I honestly didn't take it seriously. But then she dropped the real question. Would I raise her baby? Not temporarily. Not like an auntie babysitting or helping out now. She meant full-on, papers signed, legal guardianship. She wanted to go through the pregnancy, give birth, and then hand the baby over to me to raise as my own. I froze. Olivia said she couldn't go through with an abortion. She didn't want to be a mom, but she couldn't end it. She needed a way out that didn't make her feel like the villain. I was stunned, confused. But most of all, I felt bad for the baby. I already knew how Olivia operated. If she went through with adoption, she'd change her mind. She trusted me. She told me I was the only one she'd ever consider giving her baby to. And part of me, God help me, felt honored. I told her I needed time to think. She said of course, but her voice was flat. I knew she'd already made up her mind. That night, I didn't sleep, and what came next would change my life in ways I never imagined. I said yes. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no tears, no long hugs. I met her at a cafe a few days after our first conversation, and I just said it. I told her I'd do it. I'd raise the baby. She blinked, then exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. She didn't say thank you, not really. She just nodded and asked if I could come to her next ultrasound. From that point on, I was at every appointment. I took notes, asked questions. She didn't seem to care much. She'd scroll through her phone, or sigh loudly when the nurse asked her something. Meanwhile, I was already buying diapers, looking up strollers, mapping out a budget. I started calling the baby my little bean before I even knew the gender. Our family didn't know. Olivia didn't want anyone involved. Not our mom, not our other siblings, not even her boyfriend, who was still in and out of her life, like a stray cat with commitment. She told me she didn't want the pressure, said she'd tell people after the baby was, and by then it would be a done deal. Her words. At the 20-week scan, we found out it was a boy. I cried. She didn't. Instead, she asked if I had any baby ideas because I couldn't be bothered to think of it. I suggested a few, and she picked one she thought sounded cool. That was that. The pregnancy was rough, but Olivia mostly coasted through it emotionally detached. She never wanted to feel the baby. She skipped a few appointments. When the due date approached, I packed my bag like I was the one about to give birth. In a way, it felt like I was. She went into labor at 3 a.m., and I was the only one there. She screamed at me, cursed at the nurses, threatened to leave halfway through. I held her hand the whole time. She didn't want to look at him when he was born. The nurse placed him on her chest, and she turned her face away. They let me hold him first. I can't even explain that moment. He looked right at me, eyes barely open, and something clicked inside me that I didn't even know was missing. I knew, right then, this was my son. His name was Theo. We stayed in the hospital 2 nights. Olivia didn't hold him once. She signed the temporary guardianship forms without reading them. When I took him home, she hugged me once and said, "You'll be a better mom than I ever could." And then she left. Not just the hospital. I mean everything. She disappeared. The first month with Theo was chaos, but the best kind. I had no idea what I was doing. I barely slept. I lived off coffee and frozen meals. I Googled everything, cried over nothing, and held him for hours even when he was already asleep. My apartment was small, but it felt full, alive. Every cry, every coo, every yawn reminded me that this tiny human was mine now. Legally, it was still temporary guardianship, but Olivia was gone. She stopped answering calls, left our family group chats, even deactivated all her social media. I messaged her a few times just to update her, sent photos, told her Theo was healthy and happy. No replies. Eventually, I stopped trying. My mom finally found out a few months in. She showed up unannounced and found me feeding Theo on the couch. I'll never forget the look on her face. At first, she thought I was babysitting for a friend. Then she noticed the framed ultrasound on the shelf, the newborn photo, the hospital bracelet I kept in a shadow box. I had to tell her everything. She cried harder than I'd ever seen, not just because of Theo, but because of Olivia. She tried calling her that same day, and like me, got nothing. She was heartbroken that Olivia hadn't told her, but after the shock wore off, she helped me. She bought diapers, cooked meals, even stayed with me during some long, feverish nights when Theo got sick. She called herself Grandma right away. No hesitation. I started the process to adopt Theo formally when he was 6 months old. A lawyer helped me file the right paperwork, and since Olivia had already signed over guardianship and hadn't contested it, we didn't expect much resistance. We'd have to wait a bit longer before I could petition to terminate her parental rights completely, but it was a start. By the time Theo turned 1, he was walking, wobbling really, and saying small words. He called me Mama. I was already his whole world, and he was mine. Every night, I'd check on him in his crib and just stare at him. He had Olivia's eyes. Sometimes I wondered if he'd ever ask about her one day. I didn't know what I'd say. I wasn't angry at her. I was just sad that she never gave herself the chance to know him, that she walked away from someone so perfect. 2 weeks after his first birthday, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. It was from Olivia. The letter was short. Just 1 page, written in messy blue ink like she'd scribbled it in a hurry, or maybe under pressure. She started by saying she hoped I was well, that she assumed Theo was walking by, that she bet he was cute. Then came the part that made my stomach drop. She said she missed him, not in a vague, reflective way, but in a possessive, almost nostalgic, like she'd remembered she left something behind and now wanted it back. She wrote that she'd been thinking of the choice and how maybe it had all been a mistake. She'd gone away to get her head right. She was ready to step back in, be a mother again. No apology, no acknowledgement of the trauma she left in her wake. Just this weird assumption she could disappear for over a year, resurface, and reclaim a child she hadn't even named. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me was furious, boiling, shaking. Another part of me was scared. Legally, Theo was still under my guardianship. The adoption process had started but wasn't finalized. If Olivia decided to contest it, she might have a case, especially since she hadn't officially lost her parental rights yet. I took the letter to my lawyer the next day. He read it twice, then looked at me with this cautious expression I hated. He said we'd have to prepare for the possibility of Olivia trying to reverse her decision. If she filed for custody, it could turn into a long legal battle. One I might not win. I couldn't breathe. I went home that night and sat beside Theo while he played with his blocks. He kept giggling at a tower that kept falling over, then clapping like he was the funniest person alive. I stared at him, heart pounding, wondering how I'd explain it to him if he ever got taken away from me. That night, after I put him to bed, I opened my phone and checked Olivia's old accounts again. Nothing. Still deactivated. But then I made a throwaway account and searched her name in some forums we both used to browse, and there she was, posting, laughing, living. One thread in particular stopped me cold. It was about young moms who gave up motherhood and never looked back. Olivia had posted that she'd given her baby to her sister so she could travel and find herself again, and now that she had, she wrote that maybe she was ready to reclaim what was hers. Those words. Reclaim what was hers. She was talking about Theo. He was luggage. Something inside me snapped. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept rereading her words, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, that maybe she was venting. That maybe she didn't mean reclaim the way it sounded, but there was no denying the tone. It wasn't a mother expressing love or remorse. It was entitlement, like she'd given me a toy to borrow and now wanted it back. The next morning, I went straight to my lawyer again, shaking as I handed him screenshots of her posts. He was quiet for a long time before telling me what I didn't want to hear. Legally, unless her rights were terminated, she could still petition for custody, even after more than a year. But, and this was the part I clung to, he said we had something just as strong. Proof of abandonment. She hadn't seen Theo, hadn't sent money, no messages, no effort, nothing. And now, suddenly, she wanted to play mother again? Judges didn't usually favor that. Still, the fear stuck to me like static. Every knock at the door made me freeze. Every time I took Theo to daycare, I imagined her showing up out of nowhere. I started having nightmares, ones where she dragged him away and I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It got so bad I pulled him out of daycare completely. My mom tried to reassure me, said Olivia was all talk, that she'd probably get distracted again and disappear. But I knew better. Olivia had always been unpredictable, but when she wanted something, she could charm the sky into raining. 2 weeks later I got served. Not a letter, not a call, papers. She'd filed for custody. My hands were shaking as I read the petition. She claimed she'd been recovering from postpartum depression and only now felt stable enough to step into her role as a mother, that the arrangement between us had always been informal, and that she never intended for it to be permanent. She even had the audacity to write that I'd promised to give him back whenever she was ready. A lie. A complete fabrication. I remember dropping to the floor, knees hitting hardwood. I couldn't even cry. Just this cold, breathless emptiness. Theo was napping in the next room, and for a second, I swear I thought about running. Not forever. Just grabbing him and disappearing for a while. Maybe to my aunt's cabin 3 states away. Somewhere she couldn't find us. But I didn't, because I wanted to do this right. I wanted to fight her in the open, because I wasn't going to be the one hiding this time. The court date was set for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks of waiting. 6 weeks of gut-twisting anxiety, of sleeping with the baby monitor volume turned all the way up even though Theo's room was just 10 feet away. 6 weeks of smiling through gritted teeth every time someone told me how lucky I was to have such a sweet boy. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like I was sitting on a bomb that could go off any second. I hired a child custody specialist, a good one. She came with a glowing reputation and a look in her eyes that said she did not lose. We started collecting everything: photos, messages, hospital records, proof of Olivia's disappearance, the letter she sent, and those stupid posts she made online. My lawyer warned me not to rely too heavily on the emotional side. Family court liked facts, patterns, documentation. I had it. I had it all. But still, there was a gnawing fear I couldn't shake. Because I knew Olivia. I knew her charm. I'd seen her talk her way out of speeding tickets, rent increases, even theft once. She was the kind of person who cried just enough to be convincing, who made people want to save her, and now she wanted to play the role of the remorseful, healed mother. My mom was torn. She supported me, fully, but part of her still hoped Olivia meant it this time, that maybe this was her moment to grow up, that motherhood had finally clicked, but I wasn't buying it, not after vanishing for over a year, not after throwing around words like reclaim. Then, 1 week before the hearing, Olivia showed up. No call, no warning, just knocked on my apartment door like she hadn't burned our lives down. When I opened the door, Theo was on my hip. He looked at her and didn't react. No smile, no spark of recognition. She waved at him and said, "Hi, baby." He buried his face in my shoulder. She asked if she could come in. Said she wanted to talk. Everything in me screamed to slam the door, but part of me needed to see what she'd say. I needed to hear the lies. So I let her in. She looked different, like she was trying hard to look put together. Hair done, makeup soft, even wearing a pale yellow dress like she wanted to look maternal. She sat on the couch like she used to live here, like nothing had changed. Then she said it, that if I dropped the custody case and let her move in, we could co-parent, like we were two friends sharing a pet. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. She sat there on my couch, legs crossed like she was the one doing me a favor, saying things like we could ease into it and split responsibilities, that maybe she'd take Theo for weekends, and I could keep him during the week until he got used to her again. Used to her? She hadn't changed a single diaper, hadn't stayed up through any teething nights, hadn't held him through a fever or kissed a scraped knee. She didn't know his favorite toy, or how he cried when the vacuum came, or that he hated mashed peas but loved blueberries. He didn't know her. He'd just slide back into... Ready? I told her. Flat, calm, cold. I said it with Theo in my arms, and I said it like a woman with nothing left to lose. I reminded her that she signed guardianship, that I'd been the one paying bills, staying up all night, putting my life on hold, that she walked away. She didn't like the sweetness in her face melted off like wax. Suddenly, she wasn't calm. She stood up and started pacing, saying I wanted to steal her, manipulated who was vulnerable. She claimed I trapped her into giving him. Trapped her? I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her. She was the one who asked me to take him, begged me to, swore she'd never be able to do it herself. I didn't say a word. I just pointed at the door. She looked at me like she couldn't believe it, like I was the traitor. Then she said something that still echoes in my head. He's my blood. You'll never be more than a glorified babysitter. Then she left. I locked the door behind her with shaking hands. Theo was crying now. He didn't understand what had just happened, but he felt the tension. I held him tight, rocking him as I whispered over and over, "I'm your mom. I'm your mom. I'm your mom." Because no matter what anyone said, that was the truth. The woman who gave birth to him was a stranger. The woman who stayed when it was hard, who gave him everything, who chose him every single day. That was me, and I wasn't letting him go, not without a fight. The hearing was on a Thursday morning. I didn't sleep the night before. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, playing out every possible outcome, every worst-case scenario. What if the judge believed her? What if they said I'd overstepped? What if, despite everything, they gave her shared custody? Or worse, full. Theo was with my mom that morning. I didn't want him anywhere near the courthouse. Olivia showed up looking exactly like I expected. Sweet, soft-spoken, dressed like someone out of a parenting magazine. She even had a binder in her arms, probably filled with cherry-picked photos or proof she'd printed off to paint herself as reformed. When she saw me, she gave me this fake little smile, like we were about to have coffee, not fight for a child's entire future. The judge was firm, but fair, asked questions, listened. My lawyer handled most of the talking, walking them through everything: Olivia's absence, the signed guardianship, her complete lack of contact, my documented care of Theo since birth. We even had testimonies from his pediatrician, daycare, and my landlord. Then Olivia spoke, and she turned on the tears like a faucet. She talked about regret, about postpartum depression, about how she didn't know what she was doing back then, but now she had healed, and all she wanted was to be a mother again. She said I'd pressured her when she was vulnerable, that I took advantage of her confusion. She looked the judge in the eye and said she felt robbed, that she deserved a second chance. I didn't speak until I was asked, but when I did, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I told the truth. I told the court what I told myself every night while rocking Theo to sleep, that I loved him before I met him, that I showed up to every appointment, that I never asked for this. But once it became real, I stepped up, that I never treated him like a placeholder or an inconvenience. I told them about the letter, the forums, the word reclaim, and I ended by saying this: biology might make you a parent, but it doesn't make you a mom. That was it. Silence hung in the air like a held breath. The judge said they'd review everything and issue a decision within the week. It was over, at least the courtroom part. But the hardest part was still coming. The weight nearly broke me. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach dropped. Every unknown number made my hands shake. I checked my email constantly, even at 3 a.m., just in case. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. Every part of me was stretched so thin I felt like I might snap. Theo, of course, had no. He was thriving, running around the apartment, singing little nonsense songs, stacking blocks just to knock them down. His laugh kept me afloat. His tiny arms around my neck were the only thing anchoring me to this version of. Then, 5 days after the hearing, got the call. I missed it by 10 seconds, had to wait through the voicemail notification. Heart in my throat. I was standing in the middle of the grocery store with a half-full cart and frozen peas thawing in. The voicemail was short. The judge had reviewed all the evidence. Given Olivia's prolonged absence, her lack of consistent effort, and the stability I'd provided since birth, the court had ruled in my favor. Full custody granted. Parental rights terminated. It didn't hit me all at once. I just stood there, in the freezer aisle, staring at the bags of mixed vegetables like they were speaking in tongues. Then I started crying. Not a few quiet tears. Sobbing. Ugly, uncontrollable sobbing. Right there in front of the frozen waffles. A worker came over and asked if I was okay, and all I could say was, "I'm his mom." They said I'm really his mom. The moment I got home, I dropped to my knees and held Theo so tight he squealed. He thought I was playing a game and giggled while patting my cheeks. I buried my face in his curls and whispered over and over, "You're safe. You're safe. You're mine. Forever." Later that night, I got a message. It was from Olivia. One sentence. "I hope you're happy. You stole my son." I didn't reply. I didn't even delete it. I just let it sit there, a fossil from a life I'd outgrown. Because I hadn't stolen anything, she gave him up. I just made sure he was never lost again. It's been 7 months since the ruling. The papers are signed, sealed, and sitting in a folder in my desk. Legal proof of something I've known in my heart since the moment I first held Theo in that hospital room. I am his mother, not a placeholder, not a babysitter, not a temporary guardian, his mom. Theo turned 2 last week. We had a small party, just close friends, my mom, some of the other moms from the daycare we go to now. We made cupcakes with blue frosting and decorated the kitchen with balloons he kept trying to bite. He got his first tricycle, a stuffed dinosaur the size of his entire torso, and more cuddles than he could handle. He's talking more. He calls my mom Nana, and he sings along to his favorite bedtime song, even if he gets all the words wrong. He says mama when he's scared, tired, excited, or just wants to show me a bug he found under the couch. He doesn't ask about Olivia. I don't think he remembers her. Maybe someday he'll want to know more, and when that time comes, I'll tell him the truth. Age-appropriate, loving, honest. I won't lie, but I'll never let him think he was unwanted or unloved, because he was always wanted. By me. I've started therapy again. I thought I was okay, but the truth is, fighting to keep your child does something to you. It digs deep. You don't just bounce back from it. I'm learning how to let go of the fear, how to sleep without one eye open, how to accept that it's really over. As for Olivia, I haven't heard from her again. She moved out of state, apparently. Our mom says she's working at a yoga studio and trying to find herself again. I wish her well, but I don't miss her. I can't. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about him, if she regrets it. But then I remember something my therapist said. Regret without action is just nostalgia. Olivia gave birth to Theo, but I gave him a life, and every morning when he reaches for me with bedhead and sleepy eyes, I know without a doubt I did the right thing. I saved him, but more than that, he saved me too.